stood in the transport shuttle with 12 other cadets, staring out at the jungle world below. 442b spread out beneath them like a sea of dark green, thick and endless. The planet was known for one thing: it would kill you if you were not careful. The training officer commander was a tall with gray skin and 4 arms. He stood at the front of the shuttle bay with a grim expression on his face. Around, the other cadets whispered to each other. They were the best of the best at the Galactic Military Academy, representatives from the strongest species in the known galaxy. A name stood next to the window, his 4 eyes reflecting the jungle below. Was nearly 2 meters tall, and his muscles were thick with alien biology designed for combat. He looked bored. A female sat with her eyes closed. Her pale skin and long fingers made her appear fragile, but knew better. Were telepathic, and their minds could process information faster than any computer system on this shuttle. She did not need to look at the jungle to understand it. She could sense it through the electromagnetic fields that surrounded all living things. Was the only human on this team. In the Academy, humans were still new. Earth had joined the galactic community less than 50 years ago, and most aliens did not think humans belonged at the Academy. They were too weak, too slow, and they lacked the natural abilities that made other species valuable. Had heard the whispers. Humans were not warriors. Humans were not survivors. Humans were mistakes. Commander raised one hand and the shuttle fell silent. "You have been given the best equipment humanity and our allies can provide," the commander said. His voice was deep and came from somewhere in his chest. "You will have 5 days on this planet. Your mission is simple. You will work as a team, solve problems, and return to this shuttle. You have food rations that will sustain your group for 5 days. You have water purification tablets. You have communication devices. You have everything you need." He paused and his 4 eyes moved across the group, resting for a moment on. "Some of you think you are better than others. Some of you think that your species is stronger or smarter. This exercise will teach you that survival is not about strength or intelligence alone. It is about teamwork and thinking clearly when things go wrong. Many of you will fail. That is expected. Some of you will succeed. That is rare." The shuttle descended. The jungle came closer and closer until it filled the entire window. Could see massive trees, each one thicker than a human building. He could see water, rivers that moved fast and white. He could see movement in the trees, animals he had never seen before. The shuttle touched down and the doors opened. The heat hit first. It was like walking into an oven. The humidity made every breath feel thick and wet. The jungle was loud. Birds or animals that could not name were screaming and calling from the trees around them. The smell was strong, like wet earth and rotting wood and something else that could not place. Stepped out first, his massive frame moving with confidence. Followed her thin body moving with grace. Came after them, carrying his pack like all the others. The rest of the team spread out in a loose group. Commander's voice came through their communication devices. "You have 5 days. Your shuttle will return in 5 days. Good luck." The shuttle rose into the air and was gone. Suddenly, the jungle was very quiet. Looked at the others. Among the aliens was the leader. He was the strongest, and in most alien cultures, strength meant authority. "We will move inland," he said. "We will find high ground where we can see the area around us. This planet is dangerous. We do not take unnecessary risks." The group began to walk. They cut through the dense jungle, moving slowly because the plants and vines were thick and hard to move through. Noticed things that the others did not. The trees had patterns on their bark. Some of the vines had thorns that could cut skin. The ground beneath their feet held water in places. If it rained hard, this area would flood. By the time they stopped to make camp, it was dark. The darkness on 442b was not like the darkness on Earth. There was no moon. The stars above were bright and clear, but they did not give much light. The team made a camp in a small clearing, building a shelter from branches and the emergency materials they carried. They ate their first meal. The food was dry and tasted like nothing, the kind of food designed for survival, not for pleasure. Around the fire, the cadets talked about their families and their homes. Spoke of Prime, a world of mountains and thunderstorms. Spoke of where the people lived in cities built underwater. Others spoke of worlds that had never heard of, places with names that were hard to pronounce. Nobody asked about Earth. Nobody asked him about humanity. They acted as though he was not there. On the second day, the sky turned dark. The clouds came very fast, moving across the jungle like a wave. The wind started to blow hard. Could see the storm coming from far away, moving toward them like a living thing. Tried to secure their camp, but he was too slow. The storm hit with fury. The wind tore branches from trees and threw them through the air like weapons. The rain came down so hard that it was impossible to see more than a few meters ahead. Lightning split the sky and thunder shook the ground. The shelter fell apart. The emergency supplies were scattered. Their packs were torn open and contents spilled everywhere. The food rations, sealed in containers to protect them, broke open. Most of the food was ruined by the water and mud. When the storm finally passed, the team stood in the wreckage of their camp. Their communication devices were dead. The waterproof containers had failed, and their food supplies were mostly gone. Counted what was left. "We have 4 days of rations for 13 people, he said. His voice was calm, but could see the worry in his 4 eyes. "That is not enough." Closed her eyes and her forehead wrinkled as she thought. "We can ration the food. Each person will eat less. We can make it 4 more days if we are careful." But knew that they could not. A human could survive on less food than most aliens, but these cadets from stronger species needed more. If they cut the rations too much, they would be too weak to hike, too weak to build shelter, too weak to survive. He stepped forward. "I can hunt," he said. His voice was quiet in the heavy air after the storm. Turned to look at him. It was not a kind look. "You, a human, you cannot hunt on this world." "I can try," said. "You will die," said, but she said it as a fact, not as cruelty. Looked at the jungle around them, at the green darkness and the smell of wet earth. He thought about Earth, about the ancient humans who hunted with spears and knives. He thought about the knowledge that lived in human blood, the knowledge of tracking and killing and surviving. By the 3rd day after the storm, the hunger had become real. The cadets' faces were thin and their movements were slow, tried to hide his weakness, but even he could not move with his usual strength. The rations they had left would run out in 2 more days, and they still had 2 days left on the planet. Watched them without saying anything. He had eaten less than the others, taking only small amounts of food. His Earth body was built to survive on less, to stretch resources further. The others had noticed, but they did not understand. They thought he was being noble. They did not understand that humans had been doing this for thousands of years. In the late afternoon, approached him. Her pale face was damp with sweat, and her telepathic ability seemed weakened by hunger. "We need you to hunt now," she said. It was not a request or a question. It was simply a statement of fact. Nodded. He had been waiting for this moment. He had already prepared. He had made a spear from a long piece of wood and a sharp stone. He had made knives from pieces of their broken equipment. He had watched the jungle around their camp and observed the animal patterns. "I need to go alone," he said. 2 people moving through the jungle will scare away the animals. 1 person moving quietly can hunt." "You will be killed," said. The Massive was sitting by their small fire, his strength almost gone. "This jungle will kill you, human." "Maybe," said, "but if I stay here, we all die slowly. If I go, at least there is a chance." Left the camp before the sun touched the horizon. He moved quietly through the jungle, watching the ground beneath his feet. He had been trained in survival at the academy, but that training was nothing compared to the knowledge that lived in his body. Humans had hunted for 200,000 years. That knowledge was in his bones, in his instincts. He moved deeper into the jungle, away from the camp. He stayed near the river where animals would come to drink. He found a place where the trees opened a little, where the ground was clear enough to move without making noise. He waited. The jungle around him was alive with sound and movement. Small creatures moved in the branches above. Flying animals called to each other in the darkness gathering at the edges of day. Remained still. A human hunter could wait longer than almost any other creature. Endurance was the human weapon. As the light faded, he heard the sound of something large moving through the jungle. It was a heavy animal, something that did not care about making noise. Remained absolutely still, his breathing slow and controlled. His eyes, adapted to low light like all human eyes, could see the shape moving toward the water. The animal was like an earth antelope, but larger. It had 6 legs and skin that looked like thick leather. Its head was down as it drank from the river. Could see the muscles in its body, could see where the kill would need to be made. He had one chance. If the animal escaped, it would warn others and the jungle would become silent. All the animals would hide. There would be no more hunting today. Moved forward without sound. His footsteps made no noise on the wet jungle ground. He had learned to move like this at the academy, but he moved faster now with confidence that came from something deeper than training. His spear was ready. His mind was clear. The animal heard him only at the last moment. It turned, its 6 legs shifting to run, but was already there. The spear went forward with all the force his human body could create. It was not the strength of a or the telepathic power of a, but it was enough. The animal fell. It died quickly, its blood running into the river, stood above it, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. He had killed something living. This was not training. This was real. He worked quickly, using the light from his emergency lamp to see. He had watched hunting videos from Earth, had studied how to process an animal. His hands moved with knowledge that he had inherited from his species. He separated the meat from the bones. He wrapped what he could carry in broad leaves from the jungle plants. But he could not carry everything, and leaving meat behind was wasteful. Made a cache, burying the extra meat in a cool place near the river where he could return to get it. He marked the location with pieces of wood in a pattern. Then he picked up the meat he could carry and made his way back toward the camp. The jungle at night was dangerous. Moved carefully, watching for the predators that hunted after dark. He had heard the predators in the distance the night before, the reptilian hunters that could run as fast as a human could not even match. But he had made his tools, and he had made his plan. When he saw the shapes moving in the darkness ahead, he was ready. A pack of predators, sleek and terrible with their venomous spines, had caught his scent. They moved toward him like a wave of hunger. Stopped, he had a spear and he had a knife. That would not be enough against 6 predators, so he did something else. He had brought pieces of burning wood from the campfire. He lit them again, making flames dance in the darkness. He made noise, loud sounds that hurt his own ears. The predators hesitated. Fire was not natural to this jungle. These animals did not understand it. They did not understand the human making noise and waving flames at them. They split up and moved away, finding easier prey somewhere in the darkness. Continued walking. His legs were tired. His body ached from the strain of the day. The meat he carried was heavy, but he kept moving forward. It took him hours to reach the camp. When he emerged from the darkness, the other cadets were asleep, but was awake, waiting by what remained of the fire. The 4 eyes widened when he saw. "You are alive," said. "Yes," said. He dropped the meat on the ground in front of the fire. It was more meat than any of them had seen in days. "And you will eat tonight." Looked at the meat. Then he really looked at him for the first time. Saw the moment when he understood something about humans that he had not known before. Said nothing, but his expression changed. Began to prepare the meat for cooking. As he worked, the other cadets woke. They smelled the food and came to the fire. Nobody asked him questions. They simply ate, and for the first time since the storm, they did not seem close to death. After the meal, cleaned his tools and sat by the fire. His body was exhausted, but his mind was clear. Tomorrow he would hunt again, and again after that. He would hunt until the exercise ended and the shuttle returned. He looked up at the stars above the jungle, at the endless expanse of space that held all the worlds and all the species. Somewhere in those stars, there were worlds where humans had learned to survive against odds that should have killed them. Thought about those ancestors, about the over the next 2 days, hunted. Every morning he would leave the camp before the sun rose. Every evening he would return with meat and edible plants. His body grew thinner, but his resolve grew stronger. The exhaustion was part of the survival process, and he did not complain. The other cadets ate well. They recovered their strength, but something else was happening to them, something that had not expected. They were beginning to watch him, to learn from him, to question everything they thought they knew about humans. On the 4th day, after had returned from another successful hunt, approached him. The massive crouched down beside where was organizing the meat for cooking. His 4 eyes looked different now, less proud and more thoughtful. "Why do you do this?" asked. His voice was steady, but there was something in it that sounded almost like shame. Paused in his work. He really looked at him. Was one of the strongest creatures had ever seen. On any other planet, in any other situation, would be the leader, the protector, the hunter. But here, on this jungle world, strength had been useless. "Because we need food," said simply. "Because I can hunt and you cannot, because my team would die without me." "There is more to it than that," said. She was sitting by the fire, and her telepathic senses were working better now that she had eaten. "You believe something that we do not understand. You think differently about survival." Sat down and looked at the fire. The other cadets gathered around, drawing closer to hear him speak. Even those who had doubted him were listening now. "On Earth," began, "humans are not the strongest animals. There are creatures stronger than us. There are animals with better senses than us. There are predators that could kill a human easily in direct combat, but humans survived anyway. We survived in ice ages when the world was cold and food was scarce. We survived in deserts where water was almost non-existent. We survived in jungles much like this one, long before we had spaceships or weapons. He paused and added more wood to the fire. The flames grew larger and danced against the darkness. "How," asked another cadet, whose name could not quite pronounce, "how did you survive?" "Through the group," said. "Humans are not alone in survival. We work together. A human hunter needed other humans to help carry the meat, to watch for danger, to protect the children. A human alone would die, but a group of humans could survive anything." Listened but said nothing. His massive shoulders seemed to carry something heavier now, as though the burden of his own uselessness was pressing down on him. Continued, "And humans have another gift. We do not give up. We do not accept death easily. When something is hard, when something seems impossible, humans push forward. We keep moving. We keep thinking. We do not surrender because our team depends on us." The fire crackled. In the darkness beyond the flames, the jungle sounds continued. But inside the circle of light, something had shifted. The alien cadets were seeing for the first time as more than a weak human from a backward world. They were seeing him as something they did not have a name for. The next morning was standing at side when he prepared to go hunting. "I will come with you," said. It was not a request. Frowned, "One hunter is better than two. You will scare the animals." "I do not care," said. "I will come, I will learn." Knew that would be useless in the hunt. The massive would be loud and clumsy, and he would ruin many opportunities to find food. But also understood something that was trying to say. That was not just trying to help. He was trying to learn from a human. He was trying to understand. "All right," said. "Come then." The hunt that day was harder with. The predators avoided them more easily. The grazing animals heard them coming and ran, but was patient. He taught how to move through the jungle, how to watch for signs of animals, how to wait for the right moment to strike. By the time the sun was high, they had caught 2 medium-sized creatures and had begun to understand the basic principles. When they returned to camp, was waiting for them. She seemed anxious, her pale face drawn tight with worry. "Is sick," she said, nodding toward another cadet, a young female from a species did not know well. Was lying on the ground near the shelter, shivering despite the heat of the jungle. Her skin looked discolored and her breathing was shallow. Knelt beside her and examined her carefully. There was a wound on her leg, a cut from something sharp. The cut was infected. The heat of the jungle had allowed bacteria or some alien pathogen to grow in the wound. The infection had spread and now had fever. "We need to clean the wound," said. He gathered clean water and cloth. He cleaned the infection as best he could and wrapped the wound with fresh leaves from a plant that seemed to have healing properties. But he knew that this might not be enough. Alien diseases and alien infections followed different rules than Earth infections. Over the next day, as hunted to keep the group fed's condition did not improve. She grew weaker. Her fever grew higher. She began to speak words that made no sense. The other cadets watched helplessly as one of their own approached death. On the 4th night, sat with as the others slept. He held a cloth to her forehead and tried to keep her cool. He thought about what it said about humans not understanding survival like others did, but understood this. Every human understood this. When someone in your group was dying, you tried to save them. It was not complicated. It was not about intelligence or strength or power. It was about choice. "You will survive," he told, even though he was not certain it was true. "I will not let you die." But knew that his skill at hunting and his knowledge of plants might not be enough. Needed medical technology, needed the equipment at the academy. She needed help that could not provide in a jungle with only stone tools and his own hands. He made a decision in that moment. It was a decision that scared him more than facing the predators had scared him. But it was the only decision he could make. In the morning, he told the others, "I am going back to the academy, needs help. I will bring back a medical team." "It is too far," said. "Even if you could reach the academy, the journey alone through the jungle would be impossible. You would die." "Maybe," said, "but will die for certain if I do not try." Stood up. He was still weak from hunger and exhaustion, but he stood up anyway. "I will come with you." "No," said. "You will stay here and keep the group safe. You will protect and the others. That is the hunting party's job now. Mine is to reach the academy." The night jungle was a different world from the day jungle. Without the sun, the darkness was absolute except where the stars pushed through the canopy above. Moved forward, using every bit of his human night vision to see the path ahead. His eyes, designed by nature to work in low light, gave him an advantage that few other species possessed. He had memorized the path they had taken from the shuttle landing site. It was roughly north toward the Academy installation. But the memory of a path during day travel and following that path through jungle darkness were two different things. Moved slowly, carefully, testing each step before he put his full weight on it. One wrong step, one misstep into a hidden ravine or into the lair of a nocturnal predator, and he was done. The jungle sounds changed at night. During the day, there had been bird calls and small animal movements. But at night, there was something else. There were larger sounds, predatory sounds. Heard something moving parallel to him, tracking him. It was large and it was hungry. He did not run. Running would trigger a chase response in any predator. Instead, gathered pieces of wood and pieces of cloth from his pack. He had brought fire-making materials because he had learned that fire was the only thing that would drive off the predators. Fire was unnatural to this world, something that predators did not understand. When he heard the sound moving closer, stopped. He struck the fire-making tool against stone and created sparks. The sparks caught on dry cloth and the flame grew. He held it high, making the light dance and flare. He made noise, loud and constant, the way humans made noise to scare away threats. The shape in the darkness slowed. Could see it now, a reptilian creature with spines running down its back, eyes that reflected the firelight like burning coals. The predator was 5 meters long and had teeth that were designed to tear through flesh. But it did not attack. The fire confused it. Fire was chaos and danger and something it did not know how to fight. The predator turned and moved away into the darkness. Continued forward, but now he was exhausted. The adrenaline from facing the predator had burned through his body. His legs felt weak. His hands were shaking. He had been pushed to the edge of his physical limits days ago when he started hunting for the group, and every moment since then had pushed him further. But there was no place to stop. To stop was to die, so kept moving. By the time the sun began to rise, could barely walk. He found a stream and drank from it without stopping to rest. He ate some of the dried meat that had helped him prepare. He did not stop moving. The second day of travel was harder than the first. The adrenaline was gone. Now there was only exhaustion and pain. Every muscle in his body hurt. His feet were bleeding inside his boots. His hands were torn from grabbing vines and branches as he pushed through the jungle. His throat was raw from breathing hard. But he could see things now that told him he was moving in the right direction. He saw signs of human and alien activity, markers that the Academy exploration teams had left behind. He saw damaged trees where large equipment had passed. He saw remnants of supplies that had been dropped by transports. On the second night, he encountered the predators again. This time there were more of them, a pack of 6 or 7. They had his scent. They knew he was weak and dying. They did not hesitate to attack. Had no fire left. He had used the last of his fire-making materials the night before, but he had something else. He had a knife, the one that had given him. He had endurance that most species did not possess, and he had something that the predators did not have. He had purpose. He did not try to kill the predators. Instead, he fought them the way ancient humans had fought, with noise and movement and weapons held with skill and determination. He ran, and the predators followed. But he ran toward the densest part of the jungle, where the trees were so close that a large reptilian creature could not move easily. He ran through thorns and sharp vines, caring nothing for the blood that dripped down his body. The predators gave up the chase. They were hunters that thrived on easy prey. A human that fought back with such desperation was not easy prey. Collapsed against a tree, unable to go further. He sat there in the darkness, bleeding and gasping for breath. But he was alive, and was still alive somewhere in the jungle at the camp, waiting for him to bring help. He stood up and continued walking. On the morning of the third day, saw the Academy installation. It rose up from the jungle like a city of metal and light. To his eyes, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He tried to run, but his body would not obey. He could only walk, one step after another, moving like something barely alive. His vision was starting to fade at the edges. The exhaustion and blood loss were taking their toll. The guards at the main entrance saw him and came running. They did not recognize him at first, was covered in blood and dirt and plant material. His uniform was torn. His face was swollen from insect bites and thorns. He looked more like a creature of the jungle than a human cadet. But when they heard his voice, when managed to speak the words about infection and the medical emergency and the survival exercise gone wrong, everything changed. Medical personnel ran to support him as he collapsed. Someone was calling for a medical transport. Someone was activating the emergency protocols. Voices were shouting commands and alarms were sounding. Tried to speak to tell them everything to make sure they understood the urgency. But his voice was too weak. His eyes would not stay open. The last thing he heard before the darkness took him was a medical officer saying, "This human is in critical condition. He has lost too much blood. Get him to medical bay now." And then there was nothing but darkness and the feeling of being carried, and the hope that he had made it in time, that his sacrifice would not be too late for. In the medical bay of the academy, machines monitored his vital signs. His blood was being replaced. His wounds were being sealed and treated. The medical team worked with practiced efficiency, pulling a human back from the edge of death. In the jungle camp's condition worsened. The fever grew higher. The infection spread deeper. Held her hand and told her that help was coming, that had gone to bring back the medical teams, that she would not die today. With her telepathic senses, felt something change in the universe. She felt a moment where death had leaned close, had reached out with cold fingers but had not quite taken what it wanted. She felt determination radiating through the connection they shared with all humans who had ever refused to woke in a medical pod. The inside of the pod was white and clean and filled with a soft blue light. His body felt hollow and heavy at the same time. He tried to move his arm, and the pain from his wounds reminded him of everything that had happened. He had made it, the academy, the medical emergency, the journey through the jungle. It was all real. A medical technician appeared at the side of the pod. She was a species with multiple limbs who worked efficiently with the academy's medical systems. She looked down with what might have been surprise on her alien face. "You are awake," she said. "The doctors did not expect consciousness for another day. Your vital signs are stabilizing. You have lost significant blood, and you have 37 separate wounds that needed treatment. But you will survive." Said, his voice was rough and barely a whisper. "Is she alive?" "The girl," they said. "Yes, the medical transport team that went to your group extracted her 2 days ago. She was in critical condition when they arrived, but she is now in stable condition. She is recovering." Closed his eyes. He did not realize that he was crying until he felt the tears running down his face. Was alive. His sacrifice had not been too late. His desperate journey through the jungle, his near-death experiences with the predators, the blood and pain and exhaustion, it all meant something. It had saved a life. For the next week, remained in the medical bay. His wounds healed. His blood count returned to normal. The medical team was amazed at how quickly his human body recovered. Humans had been shaped by nature to survive trauma and continue forward. It was in their genetic memory. Visitors began to come. Was the first. The massive had to crouch down to enter the medical pod chamber, his massive frame too large for the human-designed spaces. When he saw, his 4 eyes glistened with what might have been moisture. "You kept your promise," said. His voice was deep and steady. "You saved, you proved that you were the strongest one among us." "I am not strong," said. "I was just the only one who could do what needed to be done." "That is what makes you strong," replied. "Strength is not measured in muscle or power. Strength is the willingness to do what others cannot or will not do. You have shown us a kind of strength that we did not have a name for." Came next. She did not speak for a long time. She simply sat near Spod and looked at him. Her telepathic senses reached out and felt her understanding. She was seeing into the part of him that drove him forward, the part that could not accept death or failure. "Humans are different," she finally said. "Not weaker or stronger, different. You have something in your genetic code that makes you survive where others would give up. I felt it when you were in the jungle. I felt your will to survive pushing through the connection between all of us." "It is just what humans are," said. "We have always been like this. We have been hunted by predators stronger than us. We have lived in environments that should have killed us. We have survived wars and diseases and natural disasters. It is just what we do." When was finally released from the medical bay, a formal assembly was called. He was escorted to the main auditorium of the academy. The massive room was filled with cadets and officers and administrators. There were representatives from 12 different species, all sitting in the tiered seating that rose up from the central floor. Commander stood at the center of the assembly. He looked older now, as though the events of the survival exercise had affected him deeply. "Cadet," said, his voice carrying through the auditorium, "you were selected for the survival exercise because you showed promise, despite the prejudices of those who did not believe that a human belonged at this academy. The exercise did not go as planned. A storm destroyed equipment and supplies. A medical emergency threatened the life of one of your team members. You were forced to choose between staying safe and risking everything." Paused, and his four eyes moved across the assembly. Cadet chose to risk everything. He hunted alone in a hostile jungle. He fed his team. He learned the ways of the predators and survived encounters that would have killed most species. When his team faced a medical crisis that only advanced technology could solve, he traveled through the jungle alone and unarmed, knowing that the journey might kill him. He nearly did die, but he reached the academy and brought back the medical teams. His courage saved the life of Cadet and proved something to this academy that many of us did not believe. Stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. He proved that humans belong here, not because humans are stronger or smarter or more naturally gifted than other species, but because humans have a quality that all advanced civilizations need. Humans have the will to survive and the will to protect their team, no matter the cost. That is a form of strength that cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be recognized and honored. The assembly stood as one. Across the tiered seating, beings from dozens of worlds came to their feet. They were showing respect, the ancient gesture that all species shared, for it meant something different. It meant he was no longer seen as a mistake at the academy. He was finally seen as a cadet who belonged. Over the following weeks, things changed at the academy. Other human cadets who had been struggling in their training suddenly found teachers and teammates who believed in them. The story of what had done spread through the galactic network. Humans went from being a curiosity, a new species that barely belonged, to being recognized as something valuable. Began spending time with learning about Earth history and human hunting techniques. He trained harder than any had ever trained. He wanted to understand not just the fighting styles of humans, but the mindset that made humans survive against impossible odds. His telepathic connection with grew stronger. She seemed fascinated by the way human consciousness worked, how it was shaped by survival instinct and community bonds in ways that other species had evolved beyond. She began to understand that what other species had left behind in their evolution toward technology and intelligence, humans still carried forward. One evening and stood on the Academy's observation deck, looking out at the stars. The massive and the small human stood side by side, an unlikely pair. "Do you ever regret coming to the Academy?" asked. "On your world you would be strong. Here there are so many species stronger than you." "No," said, "because I have learned something that I could never have learned on Earth alone. I have learned that my kind of strength is rare and valuable, and I have learned that I can trust beings from other worlds with my life. That changes everything." Recovered fully over the next month. When she was finally released from medical care, the first thing she did was find. She had weak knees and her skin had not fully regained its color, but her eyes were bright. "I owe you my life," she said simply. "You would have done the same," replied, "if you had been able." "Perhaps," said, "but you did not hesitate. Most beings hesitate when the cost becomes too high. Humans do not seem to hesitate. That is something my world must learn from you." Stood on the Academy's observation deck one night, alone. He looked out at the vastness of space, at the billions of stars and the worlds that orbited them. He thought about Earth, about the ancient humans who had hunted in forests and grasslands, who had survived ice ages and predators and each other. He thought about, and in all the other cadets who now saw him as an equal instead of a weakness. He thought about the journey through the jungle, about the moment he chose to hunt instead of starve, about the night he ran from predators and did not give up. Understood something that not all humans understood. Strength was not about being the biggest or the fastest or the most intelligent. Strength was about being willing to face death and refuse to accept it. Strength was about caring for others more than you cared for your own comfort. Strength was about moving forward when everything inside you wanted to stop. Somewhere in the depths of human genetic code, there was the memory of every human who had ever survived. Every hunter who had gone into the darkness and returned with food. Every parent who had given their life to protect their children. Every person who had faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. That memory lived in, And now, the entire galaxy was beginning to understand what it meant to be human. He looked down at his hands, still healing from the wounds of the jungle. He thought about the blade that had made, and the food he had hunted, and the journey he had taken alone into darkness. None of those things had required technology or special powers. They had required only the will to survive and the love of his team. Smiled, he was a human cadet at the Galactic Military Academy, and the galaxy would never forget what a human could do when everything was on the line. Let their tribe fall. She opened her eyes and told, he made it to the academy, help is coming. As night fell, prepared for the journey, the other cadets gave him supplies, gave him a blade that they had made together, sharp and balanced perfectly, gave him directions based on her telepathic sense of the landscape, even, through her fever, tried to speak words of thanks. Stood at the edge of the camp, looking back at the group gathered in the firelight. They were from different worlds, different species, different civilizations, but they were his team. They were his responsibility. He turned and disappeared into the darkness of the jungle, moving toward the distant academy, moving toward the possibility of saving a life. They had passed down through time and blood. He was a human hunter in an alien jungle, and he was exactly where he needed to be. Let me try, he said. The other cadets looked at each other. They were desperate, but not desperate enough. Not yet. They decided to ration the food and wait. They would see if they could survive on less. But knew that they could not. He knew that in a few days the team would be starving, and then, whether they wanted him to or not, they would ask him to hunt. He just had to be ready when they did.